Okay, well, hello everyone. Thank you for joining us today on the Integrity Systems Company Stand By What You Sell webinar, especially for the Northern Territory. I'm Deanna Lush from Ag Communicators and I'm helping out with facilitation on today's session. So today is all about helping you to understand the elements of Australia's red meat integrity system and providing you with practical tips so you can stand by what you sell. The webinar is hosted by Integrity Systems Company with support nationally from the peak industry councils, so Cattle Council of Australia and the Goat Industry Council of Australia, as well as Sheep Producers Australia for the southern events. We are supported by the NT Government through the Department of Primary Industries and Resources, as well as the NT Cattlemen's Association as well. Now, a few housekeeping items before we get going. So we are running today's session as a webinar. So this does mean that your microphones are muted, but we want to be very interactive and so would welcome any questions that you might have as we go through. We have the Q&A function enabled. So on Zoom, this means if you move your cursor to the bottom of your screen, you'll see the Q&A button. It might be at the top if you're on an iPad. So just click or tap on that one and put your questions in there, and we will answer them at the end of each section of the presentation and as we go through. If we have a significant tech issue where you can't see or hear us anymore, we will close the meeting and send you a new invite within 10 minutes and pick up where we left off, but fingers crossed we are all good with the tech and the internet today. Now, just to introduce who we have on today's session, our presenter is Joe Gangemi, and Joe is Communications Officer with ISC based at Biggenden in Queensland, so north of Brisbane there. Joe has a long history in extension, having previously worked with DAF Queensland in beef extension in central and northern Queensland. So we're very lucky to have someone with great experience in northern livestock presenting for us today. We also have Kathleen Allen, and Kathleen is Integrity Systems Company's Communications and Evaluation Manager, and she's based on her livestock property at Yass in New South Wales. We also have Emily Duncanson, who is the ENVD Product Manager. We have Lisa Barrios, who is the LPA Product Manager. And we have George Basher, who is Operations Analyst with ISC. Also, as a panellist, we have Renee McLean, and Renee is Principal Livestock Regulatory Officer in the Biosecurity and Animal Welfare Group in the NT Department of Primary Industry and Resources. And we also have registrations from the NT Cattlemen's Association, so it's great to have Romy and Annie on the line as well. So with all of you in NT and Lauren and myself down here in South Australia, we've got the ISC team in New South Wales and Queensland, so we certainly do have a fair chunk of Australia covered today. Now, the session is going to be recorded and we will circulate the link in an email to you in the next 24 hours, along with some resources just to help guide you in your use of the integrity system programs. We also have a very short evaluation link at the end of the presentation so we can get your feedback and just understand if this way of getting updates is useful. We would really love your feedback on times, whether you prefer it during the day or in the evening. So on that note, enough from me. I will hand over to Joe to start the presentation.
Thanks, Deanna, and apologies for not having my camera on. We just discovered that my internet is not as stable as I was hoping, so unfortunately I just need to keep my camera off to make sure it doesn't crash. But I thought, yeah, just to get started, we might go over what we'll be covering on today's presentation, and beginning with the role of the Integrity Systems Company, defining exactly what the red meat integrity system is and why it's so important, the integrity system programs of LPA and NLAS, the changes that we had or are having to the NVD system this year, the faster and easier ENVD platform, and we'll end our presentation with hopefully a very handy tip and tool. If you haven't already created your MyMLA account, we'll cover how you can actually get all your integrity accounts in the one place with one username and one password under MyMLA. So just to give you an idea of where Integrity Systems Company sits in the whole scheme of things, we are a fully owned subsidiary of MLA, And you can see over on the left, the grey tabs indicate where all these organisations sit and what their roles are. So you can see that both Meat and Livestock Australia and Integrity Systems Company are service providers to industry. The row, or the two rows above that, are the organisations that are responsible for policy and strategy. So they advocate on behalf of producers to decision makers. And while all of those organisations do have their separate roles, they all do work together to support industry. I'm not sure if you've seen that kind of diagram before, but I do find for producers it's a really helpful way to just to define where Integrity Systems Company does sit. So just a bit more about MLA, and there is sometimes confusion about exactly what MLA's role and what exactly what their remit is, but it is very much research, development and adoption, and also marketing. And to achieve these things, they do collaborate both with the Australian and state governments, and also the wider red meat industry, which there is quite a number of organisations that they do need to collaborate with. But the important thing is that all the levy money that and matched government funding that does flow to MLA must be invested in initiatives that contribute to producer profitability, sustainability and global competitiveness. And as we are a fully owned subsidiary of MLA, the same thing applies to ISC. So everything we do must also have these outcomes. So Integrity Systems Company manages and delivers the Australia's red meat integrity system. I'm not sure exactly what kind of mental picture you get when we talk about a red meat integrity system, but I'm hoping by the end of this presentation that you have an idea that all of these different things that we're going to talk about all come together to have an outcome of consumer confidence in the on-farm production of Australian red meat. So the system does underpin that consumer confidence, and it's made up of the on-farm assurance through Livestock Production Assurance Program, or LPA, and the identification and traceability of livestock through the NLIS, or National Livestock Identification System. And again, we also must work collaboratively with government and industry to deliver these world-leading traceability and assurance programs, and they are the foundations of the integrity system. So the red meat integrity system delivers the things that you can see on the screen. So as we just talked about, consumer confidence in the product, but it also does ensure that the Australian red meat is safe to eat and fully traceable. It provides that on-farm assurance, animal identification and traceability from paddock to plate, and it underpins the livestock selling system, which gives confidence to our buyers, our retailers and our consumers. So just to put all of this into context as to why it's so important, and I'm sure that you're very aware of how important our red meat industry is. We do contribute over $28 billion annually to the Australian economy. We support over 400,000 jobs and over 80,000 businesses, and supply product into over 100 global markets around the world. The confidence that consumers have in our product is based on traceability through the supply chain, which does provide accountability right back to the farm where the animal was raised, and production to an assessed standard. We take it for granted, living in a first world country, that our food is produced safely and ethically, but really that is not the case in all the supply chains there are around the world. And when you're selling food into international markets, and majority of our red meat does go overseas, having these transparent, rigorous production systems with audited record keeping on farm is essential if we want international buyers to continue sourcing and valuing our product over other supply chains. So the red meat integrity system also protects our industry prosperity, our market access and advantage, and that is really closely linked to our reputation for providing safe, high quality food. It supports that premium price that we receive and that positive overseas perception of our product, and it ensures that our reputation as a clean, green supply continues. There's multiple producers and many properties in the red meat supply chain, But this integrity system, and with all those parts going into it, is really about delivering that one measure of quality through one system. We all do have a role to play to stand by what we sell. So we've got on the screen there those two programs I've mentioned a couple of times, and the food safety and the traceability components of the system. We are going to cover those two in a little bit more detail. And I guess, you know, there might be some varying levels of experience amongst the participants. So we'll just quickly refresh on what they cover. LPA is all about on-farm assurance and the on-farm management of your food safety, animal welfare and biosecurity. And we consider that as a tick of assurance from your product, from you to the consumer. And as a program, it also demonstrates professionalism. So it's underpinning our market access, and it's how we professionally do that. NLIS is about identification and traceability and tracking the location of every animal throughout its life. It is mandatory for producers, and it has been endorsed by major producer, feedlot, agent, sale yard and processor bodies. And I'm sure you're very aware that it is underpinned by state and territory legislation. And I guess really importantly, it's the backbone of our ability to track livestock during disease and food safety incidents. So just on the screen there, we've got the two programs at the top in the diamonds, and then beneath that, there's three components that are central or that are common to both programs. And the first of these is the Property Identification Code, or the PIC. I'm sure you're all very familiar. It is required to be registered with LPA and an LAS. You must have a PIC. But the PICs are managed independently by the state and territory departments of agriculture. So each state and territory has their own PIC register. So really by incorporating PICs into LPA and NLIS, that is the only way that you get a national system for managing traceability and food safety, because individually at a state level, that's fantastic. They manage it at their state level, but when it needs to come up to a national level, or we need to demonstrate on a national basis that as a whole country we can manage incidents, we need to have that system that brings those state registers together in one place, and that's through NLIS and LPA. And for our industry, which does export, as we've just have mentioned, a high proportion of product overseas, having that assurance of a strong and effective national system is really important. So we're going to run through what these programs mean for you when you're managing your property and managing your livestock. And for LPA accredited producers, which the majority of you will be, I'm sure, this means you've made that commitment to carry out your on-farm practices that support integrity of the entire system. And that commitment's verified when you sign your LPA NVD for all your livestock movements. So the 7 requirements for LPA are listed there, and the first one is property risk assessment, which is all about making sure you don't have chemical contamination, that animals don't have access to dips and old spray races and things like that, or dumps. The second one is requirement 2 is about the safe and responsible animal treatment, so recording your batch numbers and expiry dates of all the treatments that you're giving your livestock. Stock foods, fodder crops, grain and pasture treatments is all about making sure again that the chemicals are not getting into the food chain, so you have records of everything that you are buying in and feeding your animals. So if there was an incident or was a problem with anything that's being given to them, you've got the records to go back and trace that. Requirement 4, preparation for dispatch of livestock. So ensuring that when you do transport livestock that you've made sure they're fit to load, that you have done appropriate curfews, that you that everything with the transport part's going to go smoothly. Requirement 5 is livestock transactions and movements, and this is another point where the programs come together into the system, because you must record those transactions and movements. That is a requirement in LPA, that your analysed transactions are uploaded onto the database. Requirement 6 is about biosecurity and having your biosecurity plan and managing biosecurity risks. And requirement 7 is that you are aware of your responsibilities under animal welfare. And we will mention a little bit more about this later in the slideshow. So on property, what does it mean for NLIS for you? Well, NLIS is about the 3 elements that enable that lifetime traceability that we've just talked about as so important for ensuring that consumer confidence and ensuring that we have the systems in place to trace and track. And to do that, we need 3 things. We need all livestock to be identified by a visual or electronic ear tag or device. We need all physical locations where livestock can be to be identified by the means of a property identification code or a PIC. So that's not just properties, that's sale yards, spelling centres, live export depots. Everything has to have a PIC. And that all data about those movements is recorded in a central database. So those 3 things have to happen for us to have that traceability that gives our consumers the confidence in our system. So LPA NVD, the NVD was the second one of those components. So first it was a PIC and then it was the NVD, was a common place where the 2 programs come together. And that is because that the LPA NVD does combine all the on-farm insurance, identification and traceability details into that one document. And that is the basis for ensuring that we have safe and traceable food product to go both to our domestic and overseas consumers. The LPA NVD captures food safety information on every animal, every time it moves from anywhere, from property to property or to processors or sale yards. And they do provide that evidence of livestock history and on-farm practices when transferring livestock through the value chain. You can stand by what you sell by ensuring every NVD you fill out is complete, clear and correct. Or if you want to try a faster and easier way, then you could always give the new eNVD a go, and we will be talking about that, how to do that later on. So now we're going to cover the changes that have been occurring and still will be occurring over this year. So the NVD changes, and there's three parts to that. There's the changes to the actual NVD versions for the species. So there's the release of the new eNVD system, and there's the decommissioning of the EDEX system. So a review of all current NVD versions by SafeMeat in 2019 recommended that a number of changes be made, and that has resulted, excuse me, in the development of updated versions for all species. Collectively, the 3 changes that you can see on your screen will provide an easier and more efficient and more cost-effective system for producers and the supply chain stakeholders to interact with the integrity system. And this suite of changes also aligns with our industry goal of ensuring the integrity system of the future is simple to use, valued by industry and trusted by consumers. So a bit more detail on the NVD changes, and I'm hoping that you have seen some of this information circulating out there in industry. We've had adverts, and we've had some social media. We've had articles in our Integrity Matters monthly publication. So I'm hoping that you have seen this before, but we just do need to make sure everyone's aware of these, the dates and things that are happening around the NVD changes. So from the 1st of July, new versions became available. So you can, if you order your new hard copy book now, you will receive the new version, or if you're using eNVD, you will be using these new versions of the NVD. And you can identify the version by, you can see that little black circle on the top of the NVDs on the screen, so that's where the version number is. And I think it might be the first time that every species was changed together in the one go, so they're all identified now by the version number 0720. However, if you still have hard copy books that you were the previous version, so the version that was current up until the 1st of July, you can continue to use these until the 31st of December. But from the 1st of January, only the updated version, or the 0720 version, will be accepted. So if you do need to order hard copy books to make sure you've got them in time for that 1st of January, make sure you do get that order in. Or we'll talk to you about how you can use the ENVD, because it is always the current version. It's also just quickly let you know that if you haven't heard of the MLA Accelerated Adoption Initiative, which was announced last year at Red Meet, under that initiative, there is currently no cost for NVD books through until the 1st of July 2021. So yeah, if you order your NVD books now, then the cost will be covered at the moment under that initiative. So to get into the actual changes on the NVDs, probably there's not a huge amount that's going to be different, but one thing you will notice is that the destination pick, or there's a place now to write in the destination pick, and this is actually a requirement in WA or in Tasmania. And Renee, you might be able to clarify for me, if NT producers were sending animals across the border into WA, would they be required, because it's a WA requirement, to put that destination pick in?
I would assume yes. Sorry, I haven't been asked that before. As far as we're concerned, we've got they would need a copy of the NT waybill still, and that would have the Western Australia pick on it, and the Western Australian health certificates would also have the Western Australian destination pick on it. So
okay. Thank you for clarifying that. So yeah, so if you do want to put the destination pick in, then you need to find that out, and we've just got a little integrity insight tip there. So how would you do that? Probably the easiest way is to find out from the receiver, so the agent or the buyer, ring up them and ask them what the destination pick is. You can also search in the NLIS database under the pick register, but if you're using the ENVD, it's got a really sophisticated search function, and it's really quite good at finding those destination picks. So that's the first change. Just another point that we would like to clarify, sorry Em, I'm jumping around on that slide, is that when you're filling out the consignee and the destination details, these can be different, and sometimes this becomes a bit of a point of confusion. But so if you are sending to a sale yards, for example, the consignee could be the agent, but the destination would be the sale yards, and that's when you would need to put that sale yards pick into that destination pick box. So the other thing that you will notice has changed is that the agent's declaration section has been removed, and that was in consultation with agents, obviously, and that wasn't being used and it wasn't being utilised. So it was removed to allow more room to put other things in. Just excuse me.
Joe, that doesn't sound any good. It sounds like you might need a drink of water there or something.
Yeah, sorry, I'll just grab a drink.
Well, you're right. You grab a drink. I'm just going to remind everyone that we do have the Q&A down the bottom. So if you want to put your questions in there as they come to mind, please do that, and we'll answer them at the end. We're going to have a general Q&A session at the end. And so obviously we've got Renee here that can answer any territory-based questions. And we've got all the brains trust really from the Integrity Systems Company to answer any questions on livestock production insurance or the ENVD or anything that comes to mind really. So Joe, are you okay?
Yep, sorry.
All good?
Yep,
all right, I'll hand back to you.
So if I can just get the next slide to come up, please, Em. Okay. So as we mentioned, as part of the changes, the EDEC has been decommissioned, and I imagine that quite a few of you may have used an EDEC in the past. The reasons for the EDEC system being decommissioned is that basically the ENVD does everything that EDEC does in a more user-friendly way, and there's really no point running two systems because there's quite a big cost involved in that. So there's been quite a long time frame of this decommissioning. So you can see there that on the 30th of April, token purchases ended, And between 30th of April and the end of December, you can continue to use any tokens that you had already purchased, but from the 30th of December, your access to eDeck will end. And so you'll just transition straight over to ENVD. So if you are one of those people that has been using eDeck, then yeah, just make sure that you remember that and you have a go at the ENVD before the 1st of January when you've got cattle that you need to load on a truck. So that's the changes that we've rolled out. And part of that process is that we've been working with industry influencers and producers right across Australia to build awareness and knowledge and skills in LPA and NLIS, because we're really here to help industry stand by what you sell. And part of that strategy is to communicate practical tips on how producers can meet the requirements of Australia's red meat integrity system. And you will see that through the next lot of slides that we have really tried to pull out those practical tips that will help you interact with the programs and to make our system as strong as it can be. So right at the start when I said what kind of mental picture do you have when you imagine a red meat integrity system, this is our go at trying to put that into a visual for you. We've got the 2 programs down each side, and we've got those 3 common linkages between the 2 systems, and it's definitely connecting everything back together. So on the outside of that, we've also got like our state requirements and all the other things that interact with it, but primarily it's those 2 programs, and that's how they interact to form that system. So getting down to the nitty gritty and exactly what does it mean when you are in a part of those programs. So as a livestock production assurance accredited producer, what do you need to do? First of all, you need to keep your online account details up to date, because that is how you're communicated with to remind you about things, to let you know when your accreditation is due, to send you any notices, to let you know that you have been selected for an audit. So if your online account details, if you haven't logged on for a while, like years, it would be a really good idea to log on and make sure that those details are up to date and that the email address and the postal address are correct. So as just mentioned, there is an accreditation process. You are required to complete that process and renew every 3 years. You commit to managing your property and livestock to those 7 LPA requirements, and you need to keep thorough records as evidence of livestock history and on-farm practices. And as I just mentioned before, it is an auditable program. So if you are requested to participate in audit, then you do need to prepare for that and participate in that audit and provide the details that that are required. So that will be your record keeping. So for NLIS, what does it mean for you? You need to keep your online NLIS account details up to date. Now, it's not compulsory to have an NLIS account, but I think it's a really important thing to do. And if you do have an account, if you don't have one, create one. If you do, make sure your account details are up to date, so that if you are sent any kind of notice or email, that you actually receive that. You are required to order and use NLIS tags for every animal on your pick. So if an animal moves off your pick, it must be tagged. And it is a requirement to record the movements of livestock in the database. So we have been presenting this presentation nationally. So we haven't just gone with typed in the set time frame, because it does vary from state to state, the time frames for doing that transfer. But I'm pretty sure in the Northern Territory, it is 48 hours. Is that right, Renee?
Yep. Yeah, that's correct.
So you also need to regularly compare your records to the NLIS database to ensure transfers are completed. Now, if you're getting other people to do the transfers, like agents or third-party providers, it's still your responsibility to ensure that transfer has been done. So even if you've assumed someone else has done it, go and check, and also ask them to send you the upload ID if they've done the transfer. If you're buying in bulls and say the agent says, you know, I'll do the transfer, it's all good, ask for the upload ID so that you can make sure that it has been done. Finally, PIC reconciliations. I'm not sure if there's any EU people on today. If there is, you know all about this, but it is a really good idea to do a PIC reconciliation at least annually, and that way you can see if there's discrepancies. We did run a number of NLIS workshops in Queensland when I was an extension officer up there, and some of the numbers of tags that properties had, you know, they might have had 20,000 tags and 5,000 head of cattle on the property. So it's really important that you get in and do a reconciliation, because if there's an investigation, you know, how tidy your NLIS database is going to really help in the situation where there was an investigation having to be done. So PIC reconciliations are a really good idea. And as I was saying, if your contact details are up to date, then if anything does happen, as in, you know, animals transferred that are not on your PIC, or you get animals transferred to your PIC that are coming from the wrong PIC, then you will end up getting an email about that. And it's really important you have a look at those emails and investigate to see why you've received that error. So NVDs, what does it mean for you on your property? Well, to keep accessing NVDs, you must remain LPA accredited. And if you are audited or as part of LPA accreditation, you do need to use LPA NVD. So I know Renee's going to talk about the difference between an NT waybill and an LPA NVD, but I just wanted to stress that LPA accreditation, which gives you access to markets, you know, selling to processors or through sale yards. If they require you to be LPA accredited, then using the LPA NVD is something that you have to do for every transfer. So, and I know Renee's going to talk a little bit more about that later. They are a legal document. So when you tick a box on the NVD, it is a declaration. You're declaring that what you do on farm meets those 7 requirements and ultimately the customer's expectations. It must be backed up by accurate farm records, and it is a pledge that the meat has been produced safely, ethically, and meeting biosecurity requirements. And that's where we get that phrase, stand by what you sell, because you need to stand by what you're ticking and say, I am doing all these things, and therefore this product meets that market who wants those things in what they're selling through to their consumers. Please make sure that you file your completed NVDs away, because you do need to refer to them in the case of an audit, and they will be looking to match up an NVD to an NLIS transfer. So that again, this is a point where the two programs come together. So we link assurance with traceability, because it all comes back to that document. Now, if you use the ENVD, then you don't have to worry about filing. It's a great advantage of that program because they're all saved in online for you. But if you are using the hard copy books, make sure you that you are keeping a copy. We talked about giving you tips that ensure our integrity system is as strong as it can be. And I guess the biggest tip we can give you is that to stand by what you sell, please fill in every NVD correctly. If it's clear, correct, and complete, that is, as I said, that is the basis for combining traceability with on-farm assurance and providing that assurance through to our markets and customers. So the revamped or the renewed NVD booklets, if you've been right on the ball and ordered your brand new NVD book and you've already received it in the mail, then you might have already seen this new page of tips that's in the new booklet. And we've tried to really make it clear on, the areas that you have to focus on and make sure that you do get things right. And we are going to cover some of these things in the next few slides. So the questions in part A are often where people may be unsure, and sometimes there's some errors that happen in these sections. These questions are all about the animal's history, and it is really important for food safety and market access. So if you're unsure or if you're in doubt, we're saying stay on the safe side and tick yes, and we'll give you some examples of what that means. So for HGPs, if you don't know if they've been, if you're unsure, then you must tick yes, because if there's only 1 or 2 in a whole mob and they have a HGP and you've ticked no, that can be quite disastrous down the chain. So it's really important that if there is a chance that they have been treated with a HGP, that you are ticking yes, and you would, I'm sure you know that you also need to identify any animals treated with a HGP with that triangular ear punch. And of course, no cattle for the EU market can be treated with HGPs. So sometimes this confuses people, and they there's question about have livestock been purchased or bred or have been owned since birth, and if you have a consignment or you're sending a load in and there's some of both, sometimes people tick yes and no. Please don't do that. If there are cattle in there, even if the majority of them were bred at home, if there's some in there that you've purchased, then the most recent date of purchase is what you have to tick. So you have to say, no, they haven't all been bred here, and you tick the most recent date of purchase. Again, with chemical and veterinary treatments, it's about the withholding periods. If you're not sure, if you haven't kept good records and you're not sure if they're still within a withholding period, then you need to declare that risk and tick yes, just to ensure that we are not getting those contaminants and getting residues coming up in our supply chain. And for all questions, tick yes or no, not both. I'm sure you're all aware that you are not allowed to feed RAM or restricted animal material to animals, which includes meat and offal, animal fats, blood, meat and bone, or blood meals. Obviously, if you ticked yes to this, then that's going to be really restrict what happens with those animals. So you need to have the records to show that's why you need to keep the records of what feed you've purchased. If there ever anything came back to say that that there was a risk, you need the records to show that the food that you've purchased, or the fodder that you've purchased for your animals, has definitely not included this product. And there's some pretty clear labelling on all products that you buy these days, declaring that it does not include restricted animal material. Again, if you've have treated animals, and obviously, if they've been treated and they're not going to slaughter, then being in within a holding period is not a disaster. People just need to know, the buyers just need to know that that those animals are still within a withholding period. So make sure if they have been treated with anything, that you do fill out that section. And the same goes for consuming material that may have been sprayed. So if they've been on a crop or they've been fed grain or anything that's been that was within a withholding period when it was harvested or grazed, then please make sure you fill in that section. I guess it may not have been such an issue, but with some of the states we've been talking to that were affected by fires, and there was a lot of people, worried about fodder that they'd purchased, or not purchased, that often they'd been donated, and they didn't have a commodity vendor declaration. They didn't know if it had been treated, and they weren't sure. Something that you can just see there, it does say in the past 60 days. So if you've fed animals fodder and you're not sure, if you wait that 60 days, then you've given it you've given it that withholding period of 60 days, which is the maximum, which means that then if you sent them after that period of time, you wouldn't need to tick yes in that circumstance. Okay, so the final part is really important, and often NVDs do get sent in that are unsigned, and it's important to note that an unsigned NVD is an incomplete NVD and cannot be accepted. So you do need to sign it because it is your declaration and your guarantee that you have met the LPA requirements and that the NVD is complete and correct. And also it's just that further check that the animals have not had access to restricted animal material. And that is really important for our maintaining our free of mad cow or BSE. So that's why that's definitely on every NVD. And again, don't forget that they're a legal document and part of your record keeping. The final part of the NVD that needs to be completed is the part the truckie fills out. So make sure that they fill that part in as well. If you do have a mixed consignment, and we did talk earlier about you might have two mobs of cattle, some that have been HGB treated and some that hadn't, or some that had been bred at home and some that hadn't. If you can divide them into groups, and if the receiver's happy with that, then you can separate them and complete two NVDs if that's an important thing for where you want to, how you want to sell them. But yeah, you must be able to identify and separate those animals. I'm just got the message that I've probably been talking a bit too slowly and adding a bit too much into my slides, and there's quite a bit to cover, so I'll try and move along a bit. So the faster, easier and new ENVD system, we do have the manager for this program on, so if you've got questions, please put them up. It's definitely more accurate than paper because paper relies on people's handwriting being legible and remembering to fill in every box. When you use an ENVD, you cannot go past, you can't go past the box without completing it if you need to. It does reduce the time and duplication because once you fill in the details, all of those details are transferred to every declaration that you're completing. So if you're also completing a health declaration, it will take the details from the first form and put it into the next form, and it reduces the cost of storing and retrieving those consignments because, as I said, they're saved online, so you don't have to worry about filing cabinets and old copies and going back through things to find things because it's all there online. And another great thing is that you don't have to wait for the book to arrive. So if you do find yourself at the end of December needing a new NVD for the 1st of January and you haven't got a book, jump online and you can access the ENVD. It will be the latest version. They've done a lot of work to make sure that this new ENVD is better. There's a lot of consultation that's gone into the process, a lot of testing, especially by the feedlot sector who do like huge numbers of NVDs. The important thing, I guess, is that you can print it at any time, even when it's incomplete. So if you do have connectivity issues, then and you can't do the whole thing offline, then you can print it any time. So you still can use it just like an e-deck. So if that's what you're used to doing, you can continue to do that. And there's unlimited space for livestock descriptions. You can draw on your signature or brand using the touchscreen device or mouse. And the great thing is that all new features and enhancements are being routinely released in response to your feedback. So if something's not working, if you provide the feedback, the team will get onto it and it will be fixed up down the track. So there will be ongoing system updates. But there's been, if you go to our website, you can see all the updates that have happened since the release. So there's some of the recent updates have been more options that you can tick, and there's still things coming such as being able to put a cow and calf sex option in there and the ability to delete submitted consignments. So as I said, please please provide your feedback, which you can either do by using the ENVD platform or you can email feedback to that email address of things that you would like to see improved. So if you're going to continue using the hard copy books, I guess a few tips are make sure that you can fill out as much as you can before you get to the point where you're loading livestock onto a truck. Make sure you order the book early or use the EMVD. Keep your records up to date. So if you need to enter information about withholding periods, you've actually got those records at hand and file it away. And most importantly, check that you have done that transfer on the NLIS database. So the next slide is some specific notes for NT producers. So I'm going to hand over to Renee. If I can just get Emily to click through to the next slide. Sorry, my screen's not so great. And I'll get Renee to talk to this slide.
Thanks, Jo, that's great. Just while I remember, Jo mentioned checking on NLIS transfers and ensuring that they have been done onto your property. So in the NT, the legislative requirement is that the receiver transfers onto your property. So just a note to, if someone tells you that they're going to, make sure that they do, because you will essentially be the one that would get the warning letter or an infringement or at least a phone call if that was to happen. So I'll be quick. MVDs are not a government legislative requirement in the Northern Territory, but as Jo's discussed, there are multiple reasons why you would need to issue an MVD with a movement. Obviously, LPA accredited producers, if you're sending a consignment to an abattoir, it's likely that they will require one for food safety assurances, and if you're sending livestock interstate, then it's possible that it will be a requirement of theirs. So NT waybills are to be completed for all movements off a property in the Northern Territory. The MVD does not replace an NT waybill at any time, and that includes movements interstate, so you'd still need an NT waybill then, as well as any interstate health cert requirements. And for moving livestock into the Northern Territory, you would need a species-specific NT health certificate and waybill. Yeah, as part of the Livestock Act review that we're currently doing, we'll be consulting with industry to see their current stance on the anti-waybill system and if it's still considered appropriate, and whether there would be interest in legislating MVDs or a multitude of options. That's it quickly, but happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Renee. Jo, you're back online again.
Thanks, Deanna. I'll just get Em to click the next slide. Okay, so we're going to go through a few more integrity insights, so little tips and tools for making sure you're getting everything done that you need to. And we were just saying about checking the database. So if you are wanting to improve your skills on navigating the database, there is a series of detailed tech tips, and these have been around for quite a while. And yeah, stay tuned, because there's a whole new how-to series of making those tech tips a bit more intuitive and a bit more user-friendly. So that's in the pipeline. But it is, as Renee said, receiver is always responsible for doing the transfer, but often sellers will say, especially for bulls, will say that they will do the transfer. Again, make sure that you check that they have done it, and also if sale yards are doing the transfer or agents, ask for that upload ID and get on and check and make sure the right number has been transferred through to your pick. If you go to our website, we do have a very detailed page of all the recording templates that you can use for maintaining your LPA records. Now, you don't have to use these templates. If you're going to use your own system, please have a look at the templates to see what's the level of detail and what are the details that you must record. So obviously, if you want to use, you might have a software program, you might have paddock books, you might have a spreadsheet, you might have a diary, but whatever you use, you do need to make sure that you are recording all the details that are required. But you can order a free printed copy of the whole template recording booklet, and you can do that as part of the Accelerated Adoption Initiative. So the phone number for the ISC help desk is there, or you can go online. You can also order that through your LPA online account. So some practical tips about record keeping. As I just said, there's no perfect formula. It's got to be what suits you. But a few ideas, when you're ordering product or animal treatment product or ag chem vet product, get the supplier to add the batch number and the expiry date to the invoice, because you have to keep your invoice for 7 years and you need to keep your records for 7 years. So if it's on your invoice, you're often going to have a place you can go back and find that. Use your phone. Most people have a smartphone, even you might not have connectivity, but if you have a phone and you use it to take photos when you're down the yards, take photos of your products. So the batch number is always on the box and the expiry date. If you take a photo at the yards of the product, of the cattle, if they're tagged and it's date stamped, then you'll have a record of what animals were treated with what product on what day. As we mentioned before, when you purchase fodder, you do need to get a commodity vendor declaration as part of LPA. If you are finding that suppliers if you are buying in fodder, are not supplying that, you can always download a copy and give it to them and ask them to fill it in. It doesn't cover weeds, so it's a good thing in that they're probably more likely to fill it in, because it's really just asked about chemicals and being any contamination risks. So it's a food safety document. If you do want to cover weeds, you would need to get them to fill in. I think the fodder industries have their own sort of declarations, but you can ask them to fill in the commodity vendor declaration yourself. Just on the next slide, we're talking about audits, and yes, we could definitely talk for hours about audits in terms of giving you information, because often people are quite worried about audits and they'd like to know exactly everything involved. So I'm not going to go into all that detail now, but I guess the main point is don't panic, because they are just about identifying areas where you could make some improvements. They will look at your records, so that's why we keep saying it's important to keep them accurate and up to date. If you are audited, you will need to have access to the Australian Animal Welfare Standards and Guidelines for cattle, or whatever species that you have on your property. You don't have to have a hard copy, you can just have access to it on the internet, but you do need to know what it is. You do need to have read it, and at least someone from your PIC needs to have completed the Animal Welfare Certificate, which when you do your accreditation and you do your LPA learning, you'll see that that's one of the modules, and when you complete the animal welfare module, it generates a certificate. So that certificate is required if you are ever audited. So please make sure you've got those two things on hand. So we've talked a lot about Integrity Systems' company role in managing the red meat supply chain integrity system, but we do have a wider role, which is all about data. And obviously these programs do generate a lot of data. The NLIS is all about data, and data within a production system is how you can drive profitability and productivity. So one of the ways of capturing data and helping people use that data to improve their bottom line is to use the livestock data link. Now, I don't think it's available through the processors in Northern Territory, but livestock data link does for the processing plants that participate in the program. you may have livestock data link information on some of your animals if they have gone through southern processes, but it does give you the option to get that carcass compliance information back and then look at that to see how you might be able to better improve to meet those market specs. And it does cover carcass compliance, animal disease and defects, breeder information, and percentage of lean meat yield. So where can you go if I've talked too quickly and you didn't quite catch everything that I said, or I've missed something that you really wanted to know? So we do have a really extensive website where you can get a lot of information. Every month we send out Integrity Matters, which is our newsletter, which links through to stories, and we have a Facebook, Twitter and YouTube page. We've also developed a number of tools and resources, and we have a few cool new animations, especially how to complete the ENVD, which if you're thinking of using it after all, how all the great things you've heard about it today, I'd suggest looking at that animation that's on our website because it really steps you through what you need to do. And as we mentioned, you've got the LPA learning in the LPA website, and we've got lots of fact sheets and record keeping templates. And if you do still need, to talk to someone one-on-one, you can always call the help desk, and they're always happy to give you a hand. So as promised, what's something that's going to make your life easier? Well, that's remembering less passwords and username and passwords to access your account. So if you haven't already set up a MyMLA account, I'd really encourage you to do so, because you can link not only your LPA and your NLIS, but if you're also MSA registered, and if you are using LDL, you can link those accounts as well. So it's a really great way to streamline that process, and not only does it give you that access, but it also, you can personalize the dashboard to get all the market and reporting information that MLA supplies. You can say exactly what you want to see, and you can log on there and look at that. It has a weather function as well, so there's a lot of cool stuff that you can look at through that MyMLA. So I think I've tried to speed up and finish on time, but I don't know how we're going for questions. But yeah, just the final thing, the NVD is a declaration. We can't do it for you, but we're here to help. Thanks, Deanna.
Fabulous. Thank you, Jo. So much good information and so many practical tips all wrapped up in a nutshell there for us. So thank you so much. Now, we do have some questions, and before we go to those, I just want to draw everyone's attention to the chat. We're just going to pop the evaluation link in there, and we would really, really love your feedback on how this type of session works for you. Time of day, day of the week, let us know. And also if you've got any ideas for things that we can do in future or future topics that you'd like to hear about. Now, questions. So firstly, I think, Renee, we've probably got a couple here for you. So question from Amber. How long do we need to keep the hard copy of the NVD waybill for?
So for the NT waybill would be 7 years.
Excellent, thank you. And just another question, sometimes there's a bit of confusion around spelling. So when cattle get spelled, do they need a new waybill?
Yes. So if they went to a spelling yard or were cleared, dipped from the tick infected area to go into the tick free area, say any of those reasons, or just spelling along the way, once they've landed on one property, the previous NT waybill expires, and then so another one is issued, and then so the NILS transfers follow that. Does that make sense?
Great, thank you, Renee.
Thank you, Renee.
So question from Jane. Now she's asked, are the hard copy NVD books being phased out? So hopefully the presentation, we've concluded no, they're not. But Emily, we've got a comment here. So if you were a bit disorganised and hadn't ordered a new book, are you able to use ENVDs until your book arrived? So can you just make a comment about hard copy versus electronic?
Yeah, no worries. So it's a great question, and that's 100% what we'd love you to do. So ENVD is there for free anytime you need it. So if you are waiting for your books, and we are experiencing a bit of delay at the moment due to Australia Post, but also our new versions, most definitely jump on and have a crack at ENBD. It's hopefully designed to be a good experience, and I think it'll get you out of hot water.
Excellent, good. Now, Amber and Jane, if you have any substitute or other questions, please put them in the chat there. Emily, we'll just keep on with the ENVDs. So can you change the details on an ENVD if there are changes just before loading, such as a change in the stock type or the stock number?
You absolutely can. So we understand that there's a lot of scenarios where you may not know the information that is required for an NVD until the point of loading, or in some cases, once the livestock are loaded. So you can update the livestock descriptions, including number of head and what they are, after you've submitted an ENVD consignment. The issue here is whether you have the ability to do that. So obviously, if your yards don't have any connectivity whatsoever, or if you're not nearby the homestead, that is quite difficult. And we're looking to improve our offline capability in the next sort of 6 to 12 months to improve that area of transition and transaction between you and the next person that uses the ENVDs.
Thanks, Em. That was actually going to be my next question. We've just got a pre-question here about the internet being very slow and unreliable to be able to access the ENVD. So can it be used without an internet connection, such as getting a truck driver to sign the form without having to go back to a place where there is connectivity? Or are there any plans to perhaps make a text copy or SMS or some other format?
Yeah, so that's going to be the bulk of our work for the next 6 to 12 months, is really bedding down this offline capability piece. We want particularly users in the Northern Territory to be able to use ENVD consignments, and this may come in a variety of solutions. So it is likely that we'll have things like SMS communication, like a native app for mobile devices, potentially Bluetooth connectivity for certain transactions and processes that surround the use of LPA NVDs and other documentation in consignments. We're undertaking a piece of work now that really explores that, and we'll be certainly basing a lot of this, I guess, user research in areas like the Northern Territory. So it's a bit of a watch your space one. For the moment, watch this space rather. For the moment, we are limited by internet connectivity to a point. So we've made the ENVD flexible enough so you can print at any time. So basically what that means is if you can be as organised as you can, do your ENVDs as much as you can online, print the copies that you require, and then fill in the final details. And then obviously a lot of those details that you're filling in can be put back into the ENVD system after the event. So for now, that's probably the most likely process that you'll use, unless you do have some degree of mobile or Wi-Fi connectivity at the place in which the livestock are being transported.
Awesome, thanks, Em. So for those people who raised the slow and unreliable internet, be assured that Integrity Systems Company has heard you and is working on solutions. I will just draw your attention to that survey link in the chat again. We would love your feedback. And just putting out a final call for questions. And I was just about to say, I think we have no more, but Joe has snuck in with a sneaky one at the end there. Now, do we still need to write Russian and Saudi eligible on the NVD? Who wants to take that one?
Yeah, I'm happy to take that one as well. So it's not a requirement that you write Russian and Saudi eligible, but we do encourage you to fill out the LPA NVD as best to your ability. So if you would like to put those disclaimers on there, you most certainly can, but just know that by filling out the LPA NVD correctly, we are essentially eligible for worldwide markets. So it's not a requirement.
Thanks, Em. Joe, if that hasn't answered your question, just pop another comment in there and we'll see that. Now, I am conscious of everyone's time and we will wrap up shortly. So, Joe, is there a final word from you before we wrap up?
Thanks, Dee. Just thank you to everyone for being online. It's certainly not the same as presenting in front of people and seeing your faces, but I hope that you do have a clear mental picture of what the red meat integrity system is, and you know where to go if you have questions from here, and that we've explained the changes and that we've covered everything that you might have wanted to know. So yeah, thank you very much for your time and giving up some of your day to listen to what we've got to say. And yeah, thank you very much, Dee.
No worries, thanks, Joe. Now, just a reminder to keep an eye out for that email in your inboxes tomorrow. We will be providing the recording to you, and also quite a few links to different things, such as a video of how to fill out the NVD and a video of the e-NVD. So keep an eye out for those. But thank you all for your attendance this afternoon. Huge thanks to Renee at NT Government, the ISC team, and also the team over at NT Cattlemen's Association. Thank you all again, and good afternoon.